The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, everyone. My name is John Lawless. I'm with the Family Process Institute, and we're very pleased today to present a special webinar with Dr. William Madsen about an integrated practice framework known as collaborative helping. Across North America, services for families are undergoing profound changes. Both community-based and government agencies are searching for effective models that support strength-based, culturally responsive, empowering partnerships with families. And today, Dr. William Madsen is going to be talking about his model on collaborative helping, a strengths framework for family-centered services. And this unique framework is really applicable for helpers holding both professional and non-professional degrees. It offers a flexible map to put family-centered principles into everyday use. So before we start, I just want to introduce Dr. Madsen. He is the founder and director of the Family-Centered Service Project. He provides international training and consultation regarding collaborative approaches to working with families and assist communities and government programs to develop institutional practices and organizational cultures that support family-centered work. Bill has written numerous of articles and is the author of Collaborative Therapy with Multi-Stress Families. It's in its second edition, and Collaborative Helping, a Strength Framework for Home-Based Services. In 2013, Bill was awarded the Distinguished Contribution to Family Therapy Theory and Practice by the American Family Therapy Academy, and he'll be presenting on some of that work today. So with that being said, thank you, Bill, for joining us and sharing with us your work on collaborative helping. So I'm going to hand it off to you.
All right, thank you, John. It's an honor to do this. So, good afternoon, or good morning, or good night, depending upon where you are and when you're listening to this. For me, it's currently afternoon in Watertown, shortly before Thanksgiving, on a kind of overcast, cloudy day. What I want to talk about are some ideas that is in this book that I wrote called Collaborative Helping, a Strengths Framework for Home-Based Services, along with Kevin Gillespie. And essentially, this was an attempt to come up with a integrated practice framework for frontline practice across a broad range of contexts. So sort of a generic approach to helping. So this has these ideas have been used in child welfare services, social services, home-based outreach programs, residential programs, inpatient, outpatient, harm reduction programs, quite a wide variety of stuff. And part of how the book came to be was I went out and did a bunch of interviews with really gifted, often non-credentialed helpers, in which I asked them questions like, so what for you is at the heart of good helping? And how do you put that into practice? Can you tell me a story about that? And what are some of the challenges that you run into in doing that? And how do you respond to those challenges? And what might be the lessons for our field? So this is really an approach to the work that has grown from the ground up. And a lot of the book is stories from people about how they do the work. So what I want to do is give you kind of an overview of collaborative helping, lay out some of its foundation, and then delve into the use of these collaborative helping maps and illustrate it by telling you a story of a outreach home-based worker who was working with a particular family. So 4 cornerstones of collaborative helping. I'll lay them out very briefly here and then go into them in a bit more depth. It's an integrative principle-based practice framework for helping. And I'm drawing a distinction here between a principle-based and a recipe-based framework. I'll say more about that as we get into it. It very strongly emphasizes the importance of the relational stance we take with the people that we serve. The attitude with which we approach people, how we position ourselves with them, the relational stance that we hold with them. It's grounded in a story metaphor with recognition that the stories of our lives don't just represent our life, but also profoundly shape our lives. And then it's very much organized around inquiry. I think one of the things that can happen in ambiguous situations, one of the things about doing home-based work is there's very little external structure. So in some ways, I think you have to hold more internal structure. And when we get jammed up, it can become easy to just offer up wisdom and counsel. Just listen to your mom. She makes a lot of sense. Or come on, cut your kids some slack. And I think there's a bunch of research from motivational interviewing that says direct provision of wisdom, giving advice and counsel to people works in about 5 to 10% of situations, so not a great hit rate. So this is much more organized around asking thought-provoking questions. So let me say a little bit about each of these. And before doing that, let me say some of the influences that have brought me to this. So collaborative helping is grounded in a post-structural epistemology, though it's also been applied in many modernist settings. Draws from appreciative inquiry, motivational interviewing, narrative solution, collaborative therapy approaches, the science of safety work and child protective services, and perhaps most importantly, the reported experiences of families. I mentioned before that I went out and interviewed a whole bunch of frontline workers, but I also interviewed a lot of families and parents and asked them both about some of their best experiences of getting help and often, more poignantly, some of their not so great experiences and what we could learn from them. And I have great appreciation for the wisdom that these families have offered up. All right, let me start in and say a little bit about relational stance and mattering. I have a very deep belief that at its core, this work is about how we are with people, about the attitude we take, the way in which we position ourselves, the relational stance we hold with them. In the past, I've written about this, describing a relational stance of an appreciative ally, which simple version of that would be one in which clients experience us as helpers as in their corner, on their side, perhaps using more political language, standing in solidarity with them to help them develop preferred directions in life. And it's one in which our work is grounded in a spirit of respect, connection, curiosity, and hope. Now, for me, in saying that, I'm not then simply suggesting, okay, so just go be respectful, and it'll all work out fine. It's really not important what you read, how you think, what you do, just who you are. And I want to add a bit more nuance to that, because I would say that at its core, this work is about our relational stance, how we are with people. That is also profoundly influenced by our conceptual maps, how we think about people and problems. There are many, many different therapy models available to us. And for me, I'm interested in evaluating the kind of models we draw on by the kind of relationships they position us in with people. And then helping practices, what we do with people, what we actually do in our practice. I'm going to say a bit more about that and tell you, give you 2 examples of a not so helpful helping practice and a quite helpful helping practice. So there's a social worker student who I used to supervise who came in one day and told me a story about how she went with her practicum supervisor to a school meeting and just felt really stupid. Like there was all this jargon going on. We're going to have to file a 51A or a 209C3B in order to get PTSD treatment and blah, 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 blah. You guys know the drill. And she thought, I will never be able to master all this jargon. I felt really dumb. She said that to her supervisor, who said, honey, I've been around forever. I've been doing this work longer than probably Noah. If that happens again and someone's using jargon that you don't understand, kick me under the table and I will ask them what they mean by that. Because since I've been around forever, no one's going to question me when I'm asking questions like that. And I thought about that, and my first thought was, well, it's a little patronizing, but it's kind of cool that you've got someone who's got your back like that. And then I thought about the mother who was also in this meeting. We'll call her Elizabeth. And I asked the social work student about that, and she said, I don't know, I'll ask Elizabeth, see what she had to say. So next time they met, she asked her, and Elizabeth said, well, first of all, thank you. Thank you for asking me. You people generally don't have much interest in my input. So I'll tell you what it was like for me. About 5 minutes into the meeting, I knew that me being there was one of the stupidest decisions I'd ever made in my life. It was clear you people had no use for me, and I felt like the worst, crummiest mother in the world. But a good thing came out of it. When I got home, and then Johnny got home from school, he learned a lesson. Believe you me, he learned a lesson. He knows never to get me into a meeting like that again. Now, I have a deep belief that this group of people who were in this meeting did not get up that morning and think to themselves, let's see if we can eviscerate this mother's self-confidence and get her son a good beating. And yet that was an outcome of the meeting. Now, this social work student was horrified by her participation in this. And I think these are the kinds of things that we all have done. They are just some general taken for granted professional practices that we all engage in. So it's a critique of practices, it's not a critique of people. Well, one of the vows she made was to try and change how she would set things up. So the next time she was in a family meeting, she started off by saying, before we start, I wonder if we could just do a quick go-around, say our name, our role, and how long we've known Freddie, the boy who was there. And they go around, and the teacher says, I'm the teacher, I've known Freddie 3 months. I'm the social worker from child welfare, I've known Freddie for 6 months, and I'm the school counselor, I've known Freddie for 3 months, and I'm the principal, I've known Freddie for 2 months. And it comes to the mother, and she says, well, I'm Mrs. Jones, I'm Jonella Jones. What do you mean? I'm his mom, that's my role. What do you mean, how long have I known him? I've known him like his whole life. At which point the social work student said, so, okay, with that in mind, I'm wondering if we could begin by you offering us any of your thoughts about how we might be best helpful to your son in creating a good school environment for him, given that you know him better than all of us combined. Now, I didn't really hear much about Jonella Jones's reaction to that meeting, but I would pretty much guess that she walked out of that meeting feeling very different about herself than the first mother, Elizabeth, did, and that she had a much better interaction with her son. So that leads us into this whole idea of mattering, which colleague Beth Root and I have been playing around with for a while. This was originally developed by Nancy Schlossberg, who is doing work with college students, who talked about how college students and all of us have experiences of feeling like we matter, we're important, we have input, and feeling like we're marginal, that we are demattered, that we are not important. And that it becomes a way of looking at diversity issues in a slightly different fashion, because people can connect around shared experiences of mattering or shared experiences of being marginalized. Now, unfortunately, in our society, there are some people who, due to their social location, have had much more experiences in being demattered or marginalized. And there are others who have had much more experience in being mattering. But I think we can still come together, and there's some sort of shared humanity about that. So we've been using mattering as a verb. Like, how did I matter this mother? Really to convey the idea that it's more than simply listening to build rapport. That mattering is engaging people as active participants in order to build their influence on the work that we're doing. So influence and participation would be at the core of this. What we've been finding is that mattering encourages involvement. When people feel mattered, they get more involved. Involvement leads to investment. When people are more involved, they're more invested in the outcomes that they're talking about. And investment leads to lasting change. So here's where I think mattering becomes not just a nice thing, but actually a transformational thing. If we think about these two mothers, Elizabeth, the first mother, had quite an experience of being demattered. And it had quite a toll on her. and on her parenting. The second mother, Janella, felt very mattered, and I would say that it had a profound effect on her and her son. And so that way, in that way, we can move from relational stance and mattering to life stories, definitional ceremonies, and walking and talking. I want to suggest that the stories of our lives don't just represent our lives, they shape our lives. And more importantly, when we, as helpers, are interacting with clients, we are inviting them into a particular enactment of life stories, that they have a particular experience of self, and in that experience of self, come to arrive at conclusions about their identity and the stories that shape their lives. So with that in mind, it appears to me that every interaction we have, walking down the hallway with someone, greeting someone in a waiting room, is an intervention. That how we position ourselves with the people we serve influences how they experience themselves, how they experience us and the helping relationship, and how they experience future possibilities. And so in that sense, in the process of talking with people, we are in a way jointly developing identities. These two school meetings with the first mother, Elizabeth, and the second mother, Camila, you can see ways in which that is constructing mothers, in either constructing dysfunctional, not very together mothers, or present, participative, actively influencing their life kind of mothers. So I want to borrow a notion originally from Barbara Meyerhoff that the narrative folks have been using, and I'm going to futz with it a little bit, that Michael White has described definitional ceremonies as rituals that regrade people's lives in contrast to many rituals of contemporary culture that judge and degrade people's lives. In many of the degrading rituals, people's lives are measured against socially constructed norms, and they are judged to be inadequate, incompetent, disordered, and often a failure in terms of their own identities. So we can see here how these two meetings, that Elizabeth, the first mother, had a rather degrading experience. And we can think about definitional ceremonies as ceremonies that define identity. And that Janella, the second mother, had a regrading experience of self in there. Does that make sense? So with that in mind, I think we can really think about all of our meetings as opportunities for people to construct their identity, to have an experience of self, and to live out lives that might live out stories that might lift them up and carry them forward in their lives, or drag them down. All right. So I'm going to skip over that part and say a little bit about inquiry. As I said before, a lot of this work is very much grounded in asking questions rather than giving direction. And I think the piece that I most want to say about this draws from Carl Tom, who has talked about, in laying out sort of different taxonomies of questions, has talked about a difference between influencing and orienting questions. That orienting questions are questions designed to help workers learn about a family or a person, hence orienting the family, the helper to the family. Influencing questions are questions designed to help a person or family change their thinking, feeling, or behavior. In other words, influence a person to think, feel, or behave differently. Carl goes on to distinguish between the intent in these two different kinds of, two different kinds of influencing questions. So one is having a corrective intent, where we have are basically dressing up questions more as subtle suggestions, in which we try to get a person to see, feel, or do differently. That helper arrives at a conclusion that something's wrong, and the questions are an attempt to correct what's wrong, to help people get to see something, to help people get to a particular destination. Questions with a facilitative intent start with an assumption that instructive interaction doesn't work, it might be colonizing and problematic, and that the goal is instead to open up space for people to reflect on the implications of their current perceptions and actions, see other possibilities, and draw on their own resourcefulness to consider new options. So in that sense, questions with a facilitative intent have a direction in mind. This is about opening up possibilities without having a particular destination in mind. Okay? All right. Now, for those of you who are doing frontline practice, would you agree with this statement? This work is messy. I think people who have been doing this work for a while know that. And at the same time, our broader culture struggles with that. We're often trying to neaten things up, to rely more and more on policies, procedures, and protocols, what Eileen Monroe calls protocolization. And yet Nigel Parton and Patrick O'Byrne have suggested that efforts to bring order and certainty to work characterized by unpredictability runs the risk of simply missing the point. And they have called on our field to rediscover our traditional strengths in working with ambiguity, uncertainty, and complexity. One of the ways in which I've been talking about this, thinking about this, is with this phrase disciplined improvisation, which is essentially finding a strong principle-based place to stand, a strong foundation, so that then you can respond to the messiness of everyday practice with ongoing flexibility and improvisation. So for me, one of the ways in which I've been trying to do this is through the usefulness of maps, both to help people hold on to very clear maps that focus and organize their thinking about complex situations, and very clear maps that can serve as a vehicle for constructive conversations between workers and families. And that will lead us into these collaborative helping maps. So for me, the simplest map that I've been able to come up with is a map that is essentially asking people 4 sets of questions. A vision, hopes and vision. Where do you want to be headed in your life? What are your hopes for your kids? Obstacles. What gets in the way of that? What can pull you away from that? Supports. What contributes to that? And then plan what needs to happen. Now, in our field, a lot, we have started with the twin questions of what is the problem and what caused it? And what I'm suggesting here is sort of flipping those 2 questions, and instead beginning with what might be a future with fewer problems, and then what constrains that, what gets in the way of that. Solution-focused folks have also suggested that maybe we don't need to talk about obstacles at all. We could just start with what is helping people move forward towards the kind of lives they want to have. So I think this offers us a way to begin with, to start by really getting to know people, and then beginning with a vision. What are your hopes for your life? And I'll give you some sample questions for that. And then having the flexibility to say, so we could ask you about what are some of the things that get in the way, or what are some of the things that support that? Pretty flexible. Where would you prefer to start? So we can go with it's the most energy. And then plan, how can we draw on obstacles or supports to address obstacles to get to a vision. All right. I'm going to skip around a bit here in order to ground this in an actual family. Let me start with this. This is Camila and Rachel. Camila is a 14-year-old Latina girl who has just an infectious laugh, outgoing personality, talents in dance and drawing. She's also been struggling with impulsivity, with depression, and escalating out-of-control behavior. She lives on the edge with a lot of risky behaviors that involve sex, drugs, and late-night partying with a crowd that scares the life out of her mother, Rachel. Rachel is originally from Costa Rica, had Camila at age 14, shortly after coming to the United States, and then had a very hard next 5 years. So you can imagine Camila being the same age now as when Rachel had her, and living on the edge is very provocative. Both of Rachel's parents have passed away. She is close to a younger sister, Sylvia, who lives nearby. Camila's father's out of the picture, as are the different fathers of her 3 younger siblings. The family lives in a poor urban neighborhood, is involved with a home-based outreach team, with Child Protective Services, and with juvenile probation due to vandalism charges. for Camila. They have a very explosive relationship. Rachel's worried that Camila is going to end up pregnant, in jail, or dead on the streets. She fears she will have to watch her daughter go through the same difficult struggles she endured coming to the United States, and in response often phones workers in crisis with a tendency to exaggerate the stories she tells about Camila, in hopes that somebody will just get how severe the situation is. Camila, for her part, is very reactive to her mom, sees her mom as really exaggerating, and minimizes concerns about her life decisions when her mom confronts her. The crowd she hangs out with has little use for adults. Camila experiences a lot of pressure to be cool, to be suspicious of adults. She struggles to find a balance between peer expectations and her own cultural upbringings of close connection among different generations. So John, their worker, is a Spanish-speaking Anglo worker. He went out for the first meeting, met with them, explained that he'd like to use the first meeting to just get to know them outside of their immediate concerns. He asked them about family traditions, how they spend time together, what they're proud of about themselves as a family. He spent time with Rachel, listening to her worries, her complaints about her daughter. Then he went for a walk with Camila, listening to her outrage at her mom's exaggerations, and hearing about her desire for more trust. Now, the context of John's work allows him to engage people outside of just sitting with them. Going for a walk was really helpful. And this initial work was really crucial to their subsequent work. These maps, the usefulness of these maps are more useful when they're grounded in relational connection. So in the second meeting, John went out and asked them about shared hopes, which turned into somewhat of an escalating confrontation with attacking blame, and John just was very patient, hung in there, stayed focused on the different hopes. Camila wanted her mom to get off her back and trust her more. Rachel wanted Camila to be able to learn from her mother's mistakes and respect and listen to her more. And what John did was begin to weave that together to develop a vision statement. And here is a copy of the vision statement. We want to get more trust and respect in our family. We both realize that trust and respect are all tied up together, and that we both have to work to make this happen. In particular, Camila will work to act more respectfully towards her mother. Rachel will work to hold more trust in her daughter. This is important to us because we miss the closeness we used to have when it was us against the world. We can't think of many times right now when there has been more trust and respect in our life, but believe that we have had some and are committed to building more. Other people who would notice and support this include Aunt Sylvia, who's kind of an interpreter between us, and Camila's dance teacher, who Rachel trusts and Camila respects. So John, this is not like just John said, what's your vision? And they pop this out. It comes out of an ongoing conversation where John is scribbling this down, and then he goes back to his office, types it up on an index card, and brings it back and gives it to them. And they put it on their fridge, which I think is quite lovely, because I don't know about you guys, but I generally have not seen much of my paperwork on people's fridges. So once we have this initial organizing vision, then we can ask questions that build a foundation of motivation. Why is this important to you? Resourcefulness. When have you seen yourself doing bits of this, putting it into practice? And community. Who in your life might appreciate and support you in pursuing this vision? And as I read you this before, you can see that this is why it's important to us. We believe there have been some times where we've seen bits of it happening, and Sylvia, Camila's dance teacher, are people who would stand with us to make this happen. So some important aspects of an organizing vision. It's important that it become mutually shared. If the vision here was just get Rachel off her daughter's back, that wouldn't fly. And if it was just to get Camila to listen to her mother, that wouldn't fly. But if we can begin to weave this together, like, Rachel, would you like to not have to be on your daughter's back? And Camila, if your mom got off your back, would you like to be reassured she wouldn't get back on? The second is that it's proactive, that it needs to be a vision about what will be happening rather than what won't be happening. Third is that it's meaningful and sufficiently concrete. Chip and Dan Heath have written a lot about sticky messages, simple, unexpected, concrete, credible, emotional stories that hold people's attentions. Here's some examples of that. There was a CPS worker, child protection worker, who worked with his mother, and the mother said, you know, we had this saying that we used to say, better together, whatever. It was kind of a dumb statement, but every time she would say that to me, because it came from me, it was profoundly meaningful to me. And I got it. I wanted to work for it. Other examples of a teenage girl who said, I want to be the boss of my feelings rather than have my feelings be the boss of me. Or a couple who had survived many years of secrecy and mistrust came up with a frame of love, not lies, not lies. So I think to the extent that we can hold something, come up with things that have poetic resonance for people, and then try to concretize them as much as possible, we will be better served. All right. Now, as you're listening to this, if you want, you could stop and just reflect on these questions for a moment. Maybe jot something down. Maybe if you're watching this with someone else, talk with them a bit. Or not pause and just keep pushing on. But the questions I would have would be, what do you find potentially useful and helpful? Beginning with a focus on what are your hopes for your child, rather than what's the problems in your family. What challenges have you or might you run into in beginning in this way? And how have you or might you respond to those challenges? So if you would like to take some time and linger over those questions, feel free. Now, once we have a vision, as I said, we can move into, would you rather talk about obstacles or supports? What gets in the way of the vision? What contributes to the vision? And we can start in either place. Yeah. Here are some examples of obstacles and supports. Obstacles can include problems, ADHD, depression, tantrums, experiences and feelings, for example, sadness, anger, frustration, old habits and practices, spanking children, spare the rod, spoil the child kind of thing, interactional patterns between people, sort of a correction and control on the part of parents invites rebellion and acting out on the part of children, which invites more correction and control, which invites more rebellion. Beliefs, my son is bad, I'm hopeless, there's no hope for us. Dilemmas and difficult situations. If I confront my husband about his infidelity, I will be penniless. If I don't confront him, I don't know that I can live with myself. And then broader cultural forces, racism, sexism, classism, heterosexism. Examples of supports would be abilities, skills, and knowledge. I know how to talk my kid down. I know what works and doesn't work, and I know when it's not working, and I know I can stop. Counter habits, sustaining habits and practices, meditating, exercising, counting to 5 before responding to your kid. Intentions, values, beliefs. I love my children. I have a desire to be a better parent. I have a commitment to sobriety. Supportive community members. And Sylvia, the dance teacher for Camila and Rachel. And broader sustaining cultural expectations. For example, a cultural value in Latinas families for respeto y la familia. So, come up with the obstacles that they came up with and then speak a little bit about them. So one obstacle that was identified was Camila's impulsivity, which gets Camila in trouble at school and with her mom. Worries that make it hard for Rachel to trust her daughter. And to see how impulsivity and worries might be connected in some way. John began to ask them a bit about that and traced out with them what they came to call that nag explode thing, where Rachel's expressions of worries lead to Camilla's explosions, and which exacerbate the worries, which leads to more reactivity and more explosions. And then we can think about at a broader sociocultural level. And John put this out somewhat tentatively. Camilla's friends were often saying to her, "Oh, Camila, just grow up and lie to your parents. Come on, you can stay out with us." And she felt really caught between this sort of adolescent cultural belief in which friends are encouraging separation and dissing of adult culture. And at some point, John sort of slyly looked at Camila and said, "Sounds like your friends have this idea that kids rule and parents drool." And she cracked up laughing and had just a funny smile on her face. Another possible cultural belief would be a possible parental cultural belief that parents should have control over their children. A lot of Rachel's friends were saying to her, "Why do you let her talk to you in that way?" And Rachel would say, "Well, I'm not sure I can actually get her to stop. And I do appreciate her feistiness." So when we think about obstacles and supports, we can think about eliciting obstacles at an individual level, at a relational level, and at a sociocultural level, and the same for supports. And then we can go further by describing obstacles in ways that separate the problems from people. So drawing on the narrative idea of externalizing, where the person is not the problem or the person's relationship with the problem is the problem, so that we can identify impulsivity as a problem and ask, how does impulsivity pull you away from the trust and respect that you guys want to have? How do the worries make it hard for you to trust your daughter? When you guys get caught by that nag explode thing, what's the impact of that on you? What do you think about that impact? Do you like it? If you don't like it, what are some ways in which you can get back to being reconnected with each other? Okay. Supports. In this, they began to identify Camilla's openness to getting help, Rachel's commitment to her daughter and welcoming of supports, the connection between Camila and Rachel and their desire to recapture the closeness they used to have. Aunt Sylvia is someone who can provide a place for Camila to stay when things heated up between Rachel and Camila and is trusted by both parties. And dance and art as activities after school that engage Camila and help her keep busy and out of trouble. So we think about this, we can think about if what we're doing is describing obstacles in ways that separate problems from people. We can also think about describing supports in ways that connect people to their better intentions and sense of agency. So we've got Camila's openness as not just a characteristic, but a thing she does. So Camila, how do you do this openness? Right? Rachel, how do you show commitment to your daughter? How do you put that into practice? What are your intentions behind that? What values and beliefs stand behind that? What hopes and dreams stand behind that? Right? We can look at other people like Aunt Sylvia, who rather than things heating up and Rachel, Camila running, they began to, in a sense, have planned runs. So if Camila was going to run, she'd run to her aunt's, and Rachel wouldn't come track her down, but her aunt would call Rachel and let her know. So it became a much more planful activity. Okay. So, again, if you'd like to linger here for a moment, what do you find potentially useful and helpful in asking families about obstacles to and supports for their hopes for a particular child? What challenges have you or might you run into in doing this? How have you or might you respond to those challenges? So if you'd like to pause this and linger over that for a bit, feel free. I will continue on. So we've gone through an organizing vision, obstacles, and supports. That brings us to a plan in which we can develop a clear, proactive, mutually agreed upon plan. You'll notice the similarities between that and the vision. That clearly specifies who will do what and engages people's natural communities to support the plan. So here is the plan that Camila and John and Rachel came up with. Camila will talk with John to examine the impact of impulsivity in her life and what she wants to do about that. Rachel will talk with John to examine the impact of worry on her life and find ways to turn down its volume without completely turning it off. Now, you'll notice here that Rachel has more signed on to doing something about worry. She wants to turn down the volume of worry, whereas Camila is wanting to examine the impact of impulsivity and figure out what she wants to do about that, right? As opposed to John having an agenda of, here's what you need to do about that. So in that way, if we go back to inquiry being around direction rather than destination, the direction here would be opening up more possibilities for Camila to have different options in responding to impulsivity rather than having impulsivity run her life. Second part of the plan was Rachel and Camila will develop a plan for Camila to go to Aunt Sylvia's when necessary in order to provide a space that interrupts that nag explode thing. Camila and Rachel will talk with John about ways to untie the knot of impulsivity and worry and have some different interactions with each other. John will help Camila find dance and art classes after school to help keep her engaged, occupied, and out of trouble in order to support the development of trust and respect. He will also help to arrange for transportation and find funding for these classes through an agency flexible fund. So this, again, is part of where in a lot of home-based outreach programs there's flexibility to walk with people through their lives rather than just sit and talk with them. John will help Rachel reconnect to a knitting group she used to belong to and will provide transportation for her to that group for the first 2 months. This was actually a pretty amazing thing. When Camila was doing stuff after school, Rachel realized she had free time. You know, Camila was in school, in these classes, not in trouble, not on the street, and wanted to reconnect to this knitting group, but she is nervous about doing it. So John said, I'll take you there. I'll go with you, which led to a lot of teasing from the other women for the 2 months that John was doing that of John. But it also allowed John to drive Rachel. Like, John is not just simply providing transportation. He's having a conversation with Rachel about who's the person you want to be in your knitting group. How do you want to reconnect to these other women? And then sort of sitting there with her as she's doing it and noticing it, and on the drive home, bearing witness to it. So we could just say, well, John's just providing transportation. He's a glorified taxi driver. We could also say he is literally moving with her through her life, through Rachel's life, to help her live out a different life story. And I think that opens up some really wonderful possibilities this way. And then finally, Camila and Rachel will talk with John to examine some of the broader sociocultural supports for impulsivity, worry, and that nag explode thing, and figure out what they want to do about that. So again, direction of opening space rather than destination of what would be the particular outcome. So in terms of some questions that we might ask of families to help them develop a plan, we could begin by asking them, as you remember the vision that you developed, what makes that particularly important to you? I think it's important that we come back again and again to why is this important to you? What makes this valuable? As you look at the various obstacles and supports we've identified, which ones seem like the best ones to start with? Would you prefer to start by addressing particular obstacles, drawing on particular supports, some combination of both? What do you think? If people are saying we'd like to begin with obstacles, well, as you think about this particular obstacle, are there times when you've been more successful in responding to it, or coping with it, or resisting it? How'd you do that? What helped you to do that? What thoughts do you have about the next concrete steps that you might take? And who might be available to help and support you in that process? If beginning with supports, we could think about, as you think about this particular support, how has it supported you? How has it sustained you? How have you drawn on it? What steps did you take to do that? What does that suggest to you about other possible next steps? And who might be available to help you and to support you in that process? So again, if you want to pause and do some thinking about some of this, what do you find particularly useful and helpful in developing plans on a foundation of vision, obstacles, and support? What challenges might you run into in doing this? And how might you begin to respond to some of those challenges? So here are some of John's thoughts about the use of this collaborative helping map. He's been using them in his work, finds them very helpful. And what he has said is, these maps are really helpful in my work. We walk into these crazy situations, there are all these distractions, and this just provides a simple map that keeps me organized and focused on the questions I ask. It's easier to engage people by beginning with their hopes rather than the same old story of all the things that are wrong in their life. The vision we develop together gives us shared direction. And this map makes my work more efficient because it highlights what are the things that need to be different and what can we draw on to make that happen. And those things are not just simply coming from professionals, but coming out of a collaborative process that happens with the family. So the work becomes more relevant to them. And they're more likely to put forth the effort to make it happen. So let me begin to wrap up here. And I originally had said that I think at its heart, this work is about how we are with families. And I think that collaborative family-centered services represents not just a shift in what services are provided to families, but how we serve families. And I think what we've been finding is in the past, I might have encouraged people to hold a relational stance of an appreciative ally and ground your work in respect, connection, curiosity, and hope. And I realize now that it's just too big, it's too vague. It doesn't mean anything. But what we found is that when people are using these maps on a regular basis to help them think their way through complex problems, complex situations, and as a structure to guide a conversation with families, that they are enacting core principles of family-centered services, that there is a focus on resourcefulness by looking at supports as well as obstacles, that there is a genuine level of curiosity by sitting down with people and listing out these maps together. It becomes a collaborative process, becomes a curious process, and the work is accountable to the people that we serve. It's being done with them. It's clear what we're going to do. People know what is going to happen next when workers pull out these maps. A number of workers who have said, you know, I walk in these crazy situations, I don't know what to do. I'm feeling completely lost. I pull out the maps, and it just calms me down. So we think that this shift in that the use of these maps over time promotes a shift in relational positioning, how workers are positioned with families. And I would take that further and say that shift in relational positioning supports the enactment of different life stories and opens up new possibilities for families. All right, so one last reflective piece that you might want to settle with for a bit. What we have come to call the ABCs of collaborative helping. As you think back over this a little less than an hour, what's one thing that you are already doing in your work that you want to continue? So A, already. B, what's one thing that you would like to begin doing in your work? And C, what's one thing that you might like to change doing in your work? Finally, here are a number of references if people are interested. Um, you can pause this and jot this down. If you would like copies of this PowerPoint, you can email me at madsen1@comcast.net. If you have other thoughts about this webinar, I would love to hear from you. It's been really, I was going to say it's been really wonderful to talk to you, but it's actually been really wonderful just to sort of stare at my computer and talk. I hope it's been engaging for you. So that's it on my part. John, is there anything you would like to add?
Well, thanks, Bill. Actually, there's a lot of neat stuff that I learned today, and also as well as it's always nice to kind of hear people talking about the framework that you're talking about. I think it does kind of re-energize the people who are in the trenches to kind of rethink about their practices. So I really enjoyed the last piece there. I just wanted to share with people just the Wiley website, and I don't know. Can you see it, Bill, on your screen? I'm just.
No, but.
Okay.
Yes, now I can.
Okay, so I just wanted to share with people, this is the Wiley website. This is the Family Process. Family Process Institute is the publisher of Family Process. And this is our most current article or journal, I should say. And it's featuring Evan Imber Black. And if you scroll down, I just want to show you real quick, you can scroll down, you could look at the video abstracts. You could also, if you want to follow Family Process on Twitter, or you want to activate a 30-day trial of Family Process, you can do that as well too. There is, if you would like to see, you have colleagues that speak Spanish or Mandarin. We have an article is translated into Spanish and an article is translated into Mandarin every time we publish it. We have a featured article, and all the abstracts are translated as well too. But I also wanted to show you at the top on the right hand side, you'll see a search button that says in this journal. And if you type in William's last name, so I'm just going to put Madsen in here and just hit go, what comes up are all the results of not only Bill's papers, but also people who have cited Bill in their paper. So the first one you see is Vicki Dickerson, and it will go in chronological order. But if you scroll down a little bit, the second one is the collaborative helping maps. You can see that that's available, taking it to the streets. And then there's a free one called Applications of Collaborative Helping Maps, Supporting Professional Development, Supervision, and Work Teams in Family-Centered Practice. And you can download that article for free. So I just wanted to show you. You can go to it. Again, it's onlinelibrary.wiley.com, and then you could just search for the journal, Family Process. And with that being said, I think that's pretty much it. Any words of wisdom do you want to share with us, Bill, or are we done?
I think we're done. Thank you, John.